This is Mark. It is Friday, September 6th, 2019, summer of 2019. I had a dream about Himmler. For those of you who don't know, he was a Nazi. And he was giving an interview with two other men. It was in a house. There was a fluorescent light going on above that was buzzing, and they sat down and gave the interview. There was no camera that was visible, but they were doing a recording. It was modern day, or postmodern day. And they just sat down and did an interview. They were sitting on a sofa, like this one, except for bigger. And Himmler was there. I think his name is Heirich Himmler, and I don't know what he did. I know he was a high-ranking Nazi, right in line with Hitler, and they were just talking to him. And they said that he was first convinced by Churchill. I think it was Churchill. He was first convinced by Churchill, and I guess became his friend, won over by Churchill. And then he was won over by Hitler, Adolf Hitler, and then he was won over by Jesus Christ. And in the interview, a man was saying, Himmler was there, and he was saying that he first, called him Jesus Christ, and he just called him Jesus. He was convinced that he was the Christ. That was pretty much the dream. I was in the kitchen across from the small living room where they were giving the interview. They didn't have a problem talking with Himmler. He was their buddy. He was first won over, I think, by Churchill, and then by Hitler, and then he became convinced that Jesus was the Christ, and he became a Christian. I don't know what it means. I need to find out what Himmler means. If anybody knows what this dream means, please tell me. It was very realistic. I don't think there was anything in the dream that was anything different from real life, except for Himmler was in it in modern times, and there was no camera that was visible, but they were giving the interview. And I would like to comment, it's amazing to me that I saw a Nazi maybe in a suit that I couldn't, I think it was in a suit that I couldn't afford at this time of my life. I've never really been able to afford, if at any time, an expensive suit. And there was a Nazi in a suit on YouTube, in a color video, and he was talking about Hitler and being regarded highly because, this is real life. Being regarded highly because he talked with Hitler. He was saying how Hitler said, it's just amazing, he was free apparently. a high-ranking Nazi just absolutely free. And just like there was a Nazi in the news from what's now Ukraine, there was a Nazi news from Ukraine. He was responsible for the death of a lot of people. He died safely in Germany. He was not prosecuted in the United States for whatever reason. I think the idea was he shouldn't have been prosecuted in the United States. Donald Trump sent him back to Germany, or sent him to Germany, where he died peacefully in a nursing home, supposedly. I mean, I'm sure he didn't die peacefully, because God is a God of justice. But he died in a nursing home, no prosecution, no jail, after he'd been in charge of a prison in a Nazi prison, I think maybe in Poland, I think is what it was. And he was a Ukrainian. And I would like to say, Operation Paperclip, they brought over high-ranking Nazis to work in the United States government. I was talking with someone and she said, well, they're not Nazis anymore, they're Americans. And I'm just thinking, is this the way the United States thinks? That if a Nazi is brought over here, he's no longer a Nazi because he's not in Germany? Even though there were Nazis in Poland? Is that the way is that the way the United States thinks? Do they think we sit down with monsters and have a nice conversation? But we brought over Nazis in Operation Paperclip. You can look it up, to work in psychology in the United States, to carry on their Nazi psychology experiments, where they take us two twins. I think they take two twin girls or two twin boys. They would separate them and maybe shoot one of them in the head. They'd kill one of them and see what happened to the twin that was still alive. Even though the twin supposedly didn't know about it, did it affect the live twin's psychology? Things like that. And they continued over here. I think it's psychology, psychiatry. I imagine psychiatry as well. They also worked in the North American Space Association. I think it's what it's called, NASA. They worked in NASA for their rocket technology. They worked in NASA because they were good engineers. So the United States wanted them after World War II. Russia was trying to get a hold of Nazis, from what I heard. The National Socialist Party is what the Nazis are, the socialists, which are taking over our country at this point. The socialists are taking over our country just like they took over Nazi Germany. The National America, that's funny, National Socialist Party. The socialists are taking over the United States. The socialists took over Venezuela. From what I heard from somebody doing a video on Venezuela, in 2019 they had free gas to keep the people from rioting, and that's a lot of what socialists want. They want free education, and in Venezuela they have free gas. Unfortunately, they don't have free food. They don't have free food in the socialist government under Maduro. Just like the socialists took over Cuba and the United States, which I would call socialist too, gradually socialist. Well, we'll have a revolution, in which case I would like not to be here. I don't think I'll be here during the socialist revolution in the United States, or I will leave shortly afterwards. Because you've got the Soviet Union, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, where people were not allowed. I saw an interview by John Stossel when he was a lot younger. People were not allowed to buy shoes made in the United States. They were only allowed to buy shoes made by the government, and there was someone offering John Stossel money to buy his shoes. His shoes were used. he was offering him more money to buy his shoes than he paid for them in the United States. In fact, a lot more to buy his shoes. I mean, of course, this is all set up, but it makes the point. This is what happened in the Soviet Union. People wanted to buy American products, and they weren't allowed to. You could get into trouble. I refrain from saying you could go to jail, but I imagine that would happen. It would have happened in the Soviet Union if you bought shoes on the street from somebody else and not from the government. You could go to jail. And people say, well, the Soviet Union wasn't socialist. That's what Noam Chomsky said. And I'm thinking, well, I'm reading Cancer Ward by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It was talking about, the points of socialism, how the government took over all private land, which is one of the points of communism. And it was called the Union of Socialist Republic, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And according to Bolsonaro, Jair Bolsonaro, it helps to look at foreign news for Americans, like maybe European news, British news. I've done a little of that. And they're talking about Argentina going the way of Venezuela. And the party that is running Argentina is called the Justice Party. Just like we have social justice warriors in the United States. I'd refrain from talking about politics because I want to make this about Jesus. But politics keep butting their nose into Christian things such as abortion, post-term abortion, basically infanticide. I really have avoided talking about politics. There was a young woman who was talking about Obama when he was president. And I said, well, okay, I don't want to answer this because people will think I'm taking a political stance, and I didn't want to turn my channel, even though it would have probably might have gained in popularity, into something political. I'm not a personality politics man. But it's just amazing to me. Here there is a Nazi, and I think the Chinese call themselves socialists too. Here there was a Nazi, free from care. Here I am living poor. I've been poor all my life. When I was growing up, we got $2 a week in allowance, and we were forced to save $1. So as far as the spending money we had, and then I had enough to buy a car and maybe put a little bit of insurance on it when I was done saving it after years and years, from maybe about 7 to about 18, I'd say I had saved up enough money from taking our $2 allowance and saving $1 of it. I had enough money to buy a car, and the car was about $100 car, and put some of the money towards the insurance of the car for a month or two, I guess. But what I got was $1 a month. I mean, that changed. We got $5 a month, or $5 a week, $1 a week and $5 a week, and we put $250 into savings. I think it was $250. Yeah, $250 into savings. And then I think eventually we just got $1 or $5 a week. And I didn't have money then. I would live off of omelets. I would take a little bit of milk, about two tablespoons of milk, mix it with an egg, and then do it twice. So I had 2 eggs, 2 omelets, and I put beans in them and maybe a little Parmesan cheese because it's a hearty cheese for the price. So I'd do that, or maybe cook up some onions and put them in an omelet. I used to have bean meals. They were just basically beans and tomato sauce and salt, pepper, garlic. And I used to have that over rice. For my fancier meals, I would have chicken. I would cook chicken, maybe a couple pieces of chicken, have maybe some spinach, a little bit of spinach, and have some bread. And that was my dinner. At one point, I was spending, I think it was about 30. I think it was about $30 a month in food. For breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I was spending about $30 a month in food. Could have been 40, could have been 50. This was a long time ago, though. It's about 20 years ago. I was spending about $30 a month in food because I was poor. I mean, things are a lot better now. I trust God that things will be taken care of. I'm a lot happier and freer about spending money. And I do spend money. I'm better off, much better off than I was. And during that time when I was spending $30 for dinner, or $30 for food in a month, I would spend 25 cents for breakfast, 25 cents for lunch, 50 cents for dinner, and that was my dollar for the day. And here there was Himmler giving an interview in a nice suit, in a nice house. I went into the kitchen to get something to eat or something, and he was talking about how he was a Christian. Or some people were talking about him, about how he was a Christian. And you look at the black people in this country, who have done a lot, officially done a lot better morally than Himmler. But then again, Himmler was white and Himmler was German. And you see black people in this country, and I'm not saying all of them, I'm not saying all black people, but there are a lot of black people that, bologna sandwich, that's lunch. A bologna sandwich on some Wonder Bread, and that's lunch. Maybe with some potato chips. They're living off the government. They are being told, hey, you are incapable. Black people are being told, hey, you are incapable. You need to live off of the government. I'm being told that as a Christian, as a real Christian, that I have to live off the government. And I hear it all the time. Oh, well, I'm a Christian too. And I remember reading about the Roman Empire and how people would say, yeah, I'm a Christian too. And then the Roman government would take them in and say, okay, are you really a Christian? And they would say, well, no, I was just pretending. I was just pretending. And that's what they would say to the Roman government. They would be let free and would probably go back to another church and cause more problems. But the people that were following Christ for truly were being persecuted and executed. Whereas the fakes, like this Himmler guy, whatever he did, were becoming leaders in the church as it is today. They were telling Christians how to live. Some of them were getting government positions, I imagine. But it just amazes me, how they oppress blacks in this country. And I will say this, more than oppressing blacks, they oppress Christians. I have a friend. They're oppressing him. They are turning him into a female, is what they would say. My Christian friend, I thought, well, is this man really a Christian? And they're turning him into a woman. And I'm thinking, and so somebody told me the other day, somebody told me about a few weeks ago, a month ago, well, maybe he wants to be called a she. And I knew him somewhat well. He's my good friend. I knew him somewhat well, dear friend, and he would never want to be a Christian, or he would never want to be a woman. But now he's on the internet, and He's calling himself a woman because he's brainwashed because of these Nazi scientists, or not partially having to do with the Nazi scientists we brought over on Operation Paperclip. He's apparently poor. They're forcing him on drugs. They're messing with his mind to make him say he wants to be a woman. His voice is raised up. He has a high-pitched voice now. He was wearing a wig. He was growing long hair. He was wearing dresses, and you have the idea that, okay, this person is German. Himmler's German. He just goes free. And then the interview with a high-ranking Nazi who knew Hitler, he was free. And you think about the Nuremberg trials, how much of a joke they were. I don't know much about them, but if you've got Nazis walking around, or if you had Nazis walking around, giving interviews and telling them, oh yeah, Adolf Hitler didn't want to attack England or Great Britain, he said, because they're so much like the German people. How can you argue with that? I like the English and the Scottish, but and the Welsh and the Cornwall, and the Cornish, I don't know that well. But the English, especially, and the Scottish, they enslaved black people and started slavery after the Dutch brought the first slave ship to Virginia. I think it was the same year the English settled in Virginia. The first permanent colony in 1607. They brought blacks over here as slaves, and so the process started. The English were bringing them over here. The Portuguese, I do know, since I know a little bit about Brazil. The Portuguese were bringing over just boatloads and boatloads of people from Africa, of black Bantu people from Africa. And they had the most slaves in modern times in Brazil of any country. I think the black people in Brazil outnumbered the Portuguese people maybe several times over. I don't know, but I think they were a lot of them. I think they outnumbered the Portuguese people. But now in Brazil, if you look at Brazil, black people are poor. It's because the white people want them to be poor. They want them on disability. They want me on disability as a Christian. They're turning my friend into a woman, or turn my friend into the appearance of a woman. He was, like, what was coming out of his mouth was that he hadn't had the surgery yet. I know this is not his will. I know it is not black people's will, considering the world. And I know there are black Christians, of course. There are Christians in every nation, German, black, British. But they're not poor because of choice. They fill our prisons. There are more black people in prison than there are white people. And somebody says, well, that's because they commit crimes. And when I was growing up, I used to think white people didn't commit crimes. But now they're trying to kill me because I'm a Christian, which is completely and utterly biblical. God gave me the dream of 4 people talking about killing me, talking about putting me into a mental institution and putting me on a drug that would kill me, something that would interact with what they put me onto now. I can't work. I am disabled. I can't work. And the modern day Nazis, the Illuminati, who came from Bavaria in Germany, Bavaria in Germany, and the Masons who came from Scotland. After the incursions into the Middle East and picking up their tricks during the Middle Ages. They use their masonry to dominate the world. They use the Illuminati to dominate the world. The Bible says that the wicked seek to take the righteous life. And people say, oh, yes, that happened back then, but not now. Well, don't you know they said the same thing back then? Saul was going after David to take his life from him. Why? Because he was jealous. David said, false witnesses arise. They ask me things that I know nothing about. And say, David, isn't it true that you did this? And David says, I don't know what you're talking about. Which has become a famous phrase in court. You have the guilty up there. They say the same thing. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. They know what the person is talking about. They say, I don't know what you're talking about. But David said, here I am running from Saul. And they said, well, when you were working for Saul, wasn't it true that this or that or the other? And David said, they're asking me things I know nothing about. I have been told several times that I'm supposed to be a child molester. I don't molest children. I'm a Christian. You say Christian and people say, well, yes, you go to church. No, I don't go to church. But what I do see are Christian. Let's move this away from black people. Black people do not want, black Bantu people, as they are known in Africa, do not want to be pitied. They want to be treated with respect, as I do. Let's move away from, they don't want to be seen as incapable. Like none of us want to be seen as incapable. We all want to be seen as important. But if you look at the history, we brought them over here. I'm sure some, and of course I'm from the South, so we were guilty of that. As was Boston as the North, who sold them to us because they had the triangle trade and they brought them in from Boston. Boston made the ships, went to Africa, and brought them back to us. And I'm sure some people treated their slaves better than other people. I'm sure some of the slaves were treated relatively well, but there were slaves that were treated horribly. I'm sure there were a lot of instances where slaves were not whipped, but they were still slaves. And if you read the Bible, they had slaves that were often sold themselves into slavery. God both blesses the Jews and curses what they do and curses them as well. The Bible says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. To Abraham, because Abraham had faith. But God also said, some of you are nothing like Abraham. And the Bible says, I cursed you with a curse. That doesn't mean everybody. That means the specific people who are living under God's curse. As people are today in the United States. I'm an American. I'm blessed. And I know my enemies are cursed. However they think, whatever they think. But blacks want to be treated with respect. I don't blame them at all. I want to be treated with respect. But they bring them over here. They're slaves. They're treated badly, a lot of them. Some of them are hung, and I'm sure some of them are certainly hung for the wrong reasons. They hung white people too, of course. There was a country song about that, and I don't believe into taking the law in one's own hands, but I forget the country singer's name. I used to listen to country music. I used to listen to recorded music, professionally recorded music. But he said, string up all those bad guys, hang them high in the street for all the people to see. And if a black man talks with someone with a slave owner's daughter, and they hang him for that, that's not justified. They come over here as slaves, then they're supposedly freed, but they have a Jim Crow law around the time they're freed. Abraham Lincoln says he doesn't believe that a black man should ever marry a white man, or that the black man should be allowed to vote. I think it's what he said. Then they have Jim Crow. And I talked with a black woman somewhere. She was half black, half Native, and Native American. And I said, well, black people weren't allowed to marry white people. And she said, and I said, well, I said, did some of them do that? And she said, you weren't supposed to. And she said, back in the day, she said, it was something else. It was something else. And they would not let black people bowl. They would not let I was told, the woman said that, black people weren't supposed to bowl because that was what white people did. And they weren't allowed to, there was a black man, he supposedly wasn't allowed to work in a bowling alley because they said next thing you know, he'll be wanting to bowl. I think that mentality is still there. This mentality that black people are bad. And the whole thing has to do around how they look and how they act. And supposedly the Native Americans were not, the Native Americans weren't treated well. I asked somebody the other day, I asked somebody a few days ago, I said, well, whatever happened to the Native Americans? Whatever happened to the Native Americans? I said, they lived here, now it's full of white people. Where are the Native Americans? I